Hey guys, Jay here. So today we're gonna take a look at this amplifier right here. This is an amplifier I just cannot stop raving about. This is a pure Class A amplifier outputting 20 watts. And it is by Thomas, who is also the owner of Thomas&Stereo YouTube channel, as well as now this brand, Galion. Now, full disclosure, Thomas is an acquaintance of mine, a friend even, so I want to just put that out there. But by no means does that mean he gets special treatment. In fact, he has no idea what I'm going to say in this video. I have not shared any kind of details about my impressions. And as you've seen with my TS A75 review, which was the budget line for Galion that I reviewed, I will be laying out all the nitty-gritty pros and cons that you should watch out for when you look at this amplifier. But truth be told, I am absolutely in love with this amplifier to where I will probably buy this. So just putting that out there, that I probably won't be faulting too much of its sound characteristic as I did with the TS A75, which I found the mid-range to be not particularly my liking, since the mid-range was a little bit recessed compared to the bass and the treble. The Galion TS A20 here is a totally different beast compared to the TS A75, which is also to be expected considering the TS A20 cost $3,750, which is much more than the Galion TS A75. But again, one thing I really have to give Thomas credit for is that he is very value conscious. You know, as a YouTuber who used to review a bunch of stuff, there's advantages that come with that, and one of it is being very value conscious and how people will feel about the value proposition. So inside the Galion TS A20 is packed with exotic quality gear that you would find in much like not even the high end, like ultra high end stuff in the market. And to give you a little bit of context, the Triangle Art I20, which is a $12,500 integrated tube amplifier out of California that I reviewed recently, that amplifier, despite the price point of $12,500 and packed with quality materials like Mundorf capacitors, does not come close to the parts used in the Galion TS A20 at $3,750. Inside the Galion TS A20, it uses exotic, high-quality materials that's really high-end, like Jupiter capacitors. I am personally a big fan of the Jupiter copper foil capacitors, and the only thing that I think is better than that is probably something like Duland, which is much more costlier. But as if the Jupiter capacitors per side wasn't good enough, Thomas decided to go one step further by adding exotic Jupiter vitamin Q capacitors and also exotic Jupiter vintage tone capacitors, which are the smaller capacitors that used to be connected to the bigger Jupiter capacitors here, to ultimately tune the sound of this amplifier. So a lot has gone into the quality and the sound profile of this amplifier, and you can really tell that when you hook it up in a high-end system. This is not an amplifier that you would normally see in this price range whatsoever. But the quality doesn't end there with this amplifier. Inside, you can see these massive capacitors making up 400,000 microfarad of capacitance for those extreme dynamic control. And talking about dynamic control, it also has two toroidal transformers. So that ultimately this amplifier can drive your speakers with great dynamics and control. And despite the fact that this amplifier only outputs 20 watts, which doesn't seem like a lot, I had absolutely no problem throwing, speakers with 85 dB sensitivity and up with this amplifier. Those pairings worked wonderfully, and it was a stark contrast from the Triangle Art I20, which I struggled to find a speaker that would get loud enough with that integrated amplifier, despite the fact that this outputs 20 watts in Class A. So the Galion A20 is much more powerful, at least in the real world, and it sounds much better, even compared to the Triangle Art I20 that cost $12,500. And you might bring up the point that a Triangle Art I20 is an integrated amplifier with a preamplifier built in, while the Galion doesn't have a preamplifier built in, so you have to go out there and find the right preamplifier pairing, which can be a hassle. Therefore, there is the convenience factor with the Triangle Art I20, which is fair. But the Galion A20 also brings in an advantage from, again, Thomas being a YouTuber, longtime YouTuber that have been doing this before even I was doing this. So one thing about YouTube is that when you are a YouTube reviewer, as you may know, we get to play around with a lot of stuff and pair different things. Well, Thomas has a lot of friends, and he is known to, he even came here to test this unit when it was in this prototype phase. He would pair up with different things to make sure that it sounds good with majority of the speakers and majority of the gear, making sure that the tuning works well with majority of the gear and the speakers synergistically. And that pays off because the Galion A20 is a great match with virtually any speaker and any preamplifier that I've paired up thus far. And trust me, I tried heck a lot on this amplifier, ranging from highly detailed, revealing Platimon speakers that I love to speakers like the Aquara Acoustic MRC that I'm absolutely loving right now with its transparency and overall neutral balance of things with great detail orientation, and even down to the Revival Audio Atlante Force that I'm currently rocking right now for several months. Absolutely loving this speaker with this pairing especially. But you might say, well, these speakers are all relatively sensitive, ranging from anywhere from 89 to 91 dB. How about speakers that are less sensitive, demanding more power, like the Bucard S400 Mark II or the KEF LS50 Metas? And I can confidently say that this amplifier didn't even break a sweat driving those speakers, and it sounded pretty darn good. Not to mention that it actually scales very well with more higher end speakers like the Goddard acoustic speakers I have right now, the Capello 100, which I found to be a very easy speaker to get loud, but also a pretty hard to match speaker, giving it justice with the equipment that is deserving to be paired with such a high-end speaker with very unique technology that I'll get into in that review. But this amplifier, what a match with a speaker like that. In fact, this amplifier reminds me a lot of the qualities and the sonic characteristic I love about Accuphase. So that says something. Now, despite my absolute love for the TS A20, there are some caveats to go over before we get to the sound section where I'll be gushing over and while trying to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from. But before that, let's get over some of the caveats here first, which may be a deal breaker for some of you. One of it is the fact that the chassis is not that high quality compared to this price range. Most of the budgets seem to have gone inside and the overall sonic kind of aspect rather than the chassis attention to detail. Now, that's not to say the chassis is terrible, but it's pretty generic. And I do like the emblem here, the logo, much different from the TS A75. They have this kind of carved out, Galion logo, which I do like. So there are aspects about the build quality I do like, but overall, it's just going to be, typical aluminum chassis, nothing too special, nothing at the level of Accuphase, Luxman, or other high-end gear. And again, the operation is pretty simple. The front has a button that you turn on and off, and the LED is a little bit bright, but you can disconnect that from the inside of the amplifier, or you can just put a duct tape over it. But overall, I did find the LED of that blue LED to be a little bit bright when I turned down the lights in my room. Small caveat there. Now, on the back side, we find a bigger caveat, which is no balanced inputs. Now, the parts are high quality. It's imported from Taiwan, and it is pure copper binding post, very nice. And the RC connectors are not cheap either. But I'm a little bit confused here because it does seem like it's a dual mono design inside. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, Thomas. But again, the balanced inputs does seem like a kind of a no-brainer in this since it does look like a dual mono design, again, if I'm not mistaken, but yet we don't get balanced inputs. Now, this is a little bit of a deal breaker for me because as someone who does run long XLR cables at times in my setup, I do find that to be useful of a connection, especially when it is a dual mono design. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but just the RCA is what you get here, so that's one of the downsides, and I would say that is one of the biggest downsides I see with this unit. Now, another downside, and this one really breaks my heart, is that Thomas expressed to me that this was really a passion project, and they only have few units left, and after they sell, they may discontinue it, since the demand wasn't as high as he had hoped to be. Really, there is not much profit margin in it for him, according to Galion as a company. So I had to really think about if I wanted to do this review in the first place, because I usually don't review products that's going to be discontinued very soon. But I thought I'll put that disclaimer out there while reviewing this, because truly this is a gem. And maybe with more demand, Thomas is willing to make more. I can't speak for him, but that's what I'm hoping for, because this amplifier is absolutely a gem, and I usually don't buy discontinued products. After all, why would I be recommending something that you can't buy right now? But this was an exception because, well, this one really tickled my feathers. I really love this amplifier, and even if it's discontinued, I will most likely own one because it's just that good. So what's so good about this amplifier? Well, first of all, the quality really speaks for itself. The sound quality coming out of this amplifier is gigantic in the soundstage. It's wide, deep, and holographic like a tube amplifier. In fact, it straight up bests the Triangle Art i20, which I deemed to have an incredible soundstage because it's a tube integrated amplifier in Class A. This amplifier is Class A, but it's solid state. Despite that, it has this enormous soundstage that bests even tube amplifiers and tube integrated amplifiers in that kind of range of high-end. $12,500 is no joke. Like seriously, the soundstage coming out of this amplifier whenever I hook it up is absolutely incredible. And then when it comes to low-powered, Class A amplifiers, one of the things is the heft in the bass. Getting that heft right in the bass can be a little bit of a daunting task, but here, because maybe it's solid state, the bass is absolutely crazy. It has dynamics out the wazoo, and if you know anything about Thomas and if you follow his channel for a while, and if you've been his friend like me, then you will know that he has a kind of a taste that's a little bit V-shaped. I will call this the masterpiece in terms of that V-shaped sound, meaning it does have that little bit of boost in the bass and treble. We'll talk about the treble in the later part of this video, but the bass has this a little bit of elevation, but it's done in such a way that it sounds really, really good. It sounds full, bombastic, textured, everything that you could look for in a high-end amplifier. This amplifier has it. In fact, it has a lot of the qualities in the bass that I love about my monoblocks from AGD, the Audience, which also costs $8,800, which is, again, much more expensive than this amplifier. Now, again, given that the AGD puts out more power, that's another story, but at the same time, this amplifier also had no trouble driving any of my speakers, so I find that point to be a little bit not relevant. Now, I must say, if you're looking for the tightest, quickest, fastest bass with the most tactility, this is probably still not it. It has soul, it has texture, so it's not going to be the tightest, most tactile bass you've ever heard, but there is some tactility there, and it is much tighter than a lot, most of the tube integrated or tube amplifiers I've heard in the single-ended design world. So considering that it has the holographic soundstage of what is akin to a very good tube integrated amplifier like the Tonmeister or the Triangle Art i20, this is a very good amplifier having that soundstage and also that bass presence that's missing in a lot of tube integrated amplifiers and amplifiers that I love so much in the single-ended world. Now the mid-range is something that is absolutely spectacular on this amplifier. It's mesmerizing. It is a very quiet amplifier in the background, and out of this pitch background, you get this vocal coming through, and it's so sweet and so nuanced and delicate. You hear every breath, but not in a fatiguing way. It is extremely smooth and easy to listen to while retaining all that nuance and detail. A quality that I again find in my reference AGD monoblocks. So again, this amplifier is, for the fraction of the price, in my opinion, a very good sound profile in the mid-range. And you guys know I'm a tone guy, and the tone of the mid-range on this amplifier is done so well. That Jupiter capacitor giving that smoothness while giving this wonderful musically inviting sound that really engages you with the music, but also has this audiophile quality of having the nuance and details that's popping out at you with great imaging and focus is a really, really, an amazing experience. Again, really love this amplifier's mid-range. It is very, very much inviting, warm, but not too warm, with all the nuance and detail, a really good balance in that mid-range. Now, when it comes to the high frequency, I would say the high frequency is slightly elevated. but it's done in such a subtle way to where you get this a little bit more sparkle and detail in a sweet, like almost class A kind of design way, which gives this illusion of, better sense of space, better imaging focus, and, spacious cues. When things go by, you can hear, there's a lot of nuance and detail within this amplifier that comes to life when I hook it up to my speakers. And overall, all of this combines for a sound that I really enjoy, and I'm not even a guy that likes a V-shaped sound. It is done in such a way to where it is colored. It is not the most neutral, most reference amplifier out there if that's what you're looking for, but certainly is such an enjoyable amplifier, especially if you're someone that's looking for a tube sound in a solid-state amplifier. This is one of those cases where I can confidently say, well, if you are blinded, if you were put in a blindfold, you probably won't be able to tell that this is a solid-state amplifier, especially in that mid-range and high frequency. Is done in such a very holographic and easy to discern way, where I see a lot of audiophile qualities that Thomas tried to bring to the table, but at the same time, the musicality is definitely not left out with this amplifier. So overall, is it neutral? Is it warm? Is it, detailed? Well, I feel like it's a lot of those things all combined, which is rare. So first of all, I do find this amplifier to be fairly well balanced, but slightly V-shaped like I talked about, but not by much, especially in the treble. So I do find that this amplifier does bring out more bass and does have a little bit more sparkle in the high end, but at the same time, everything is very balanced. We don't have that kind of suck out in the mid-range, that recessed mid-range that we saw with the TS A75. Here, everything is very readily in front of you and easy to discern with a deep, wide, and holographic soundstage that even surpasses the TS A75 by a landslide. So this is definitely a amplifier that is not really meant for entry level, but really a much higher end performance at an reasonable price. I wouldn't say entry level. $3,750 is still a lot of money to shell out for an amplifier, but you are heavily rewarded for what you pay here, and you can see it inside readily with your eyes. So who is this amplifier for? Well, if you can get one, that is, if it's not discontinued by the time you decide to buy it, well, this amplifier is going to be for a lot of people. It's one of those amplifiers that is a very good all-rounder with good rich bass, good mid-range textures, and nuance, with good warmth and body to the sound, easy to listen to at the same time, have all the details and nuance. Exact reason I love my AGD monoblocks, but with a little bit more class A, sweet sound and holographicness that you get right out of the box, even with a solid state preamplifier pairing, and not necessarily a tube preamplifier like my ARC Audio. Now, here's a pro tip, and this is definitely for people that want a little bit more out of this Galion TS A20, is to find a good tube preamplifier like the ARC. The reason being is that with the tube preamplifier pairing really does bring out a little bit more of that holographicness, and just really marries well with what the Galion TS A20 is trying to do, and it brings out more of that in your system. So if you're someone that really likes a holographic soundstage, wide, deep soundstage like a tube amplifier, this with a tube preamplifier, just absolute bliss. And so for me, this is going to be a no-brainer kind of recommendation, and I am highly biased here, not because Thomas is my friend, but because I just love the sound of this amplifier, to where I loved it with so many different setups, different speakers, different equipment, to where I really can't fault this amplifier. Usually I have few points like recessed mid-range, a little bit of treble balance and here and there, but this is one of those instances where I really cannot fault the amplifier, because it never sounded bad, or it never sounded not to my liking in any kind of setup. So I think Thomas absolutely nailed it with this amplifier, and it goes on my top recommendation list absolutely. So that's pretty much it from me. Thank you for watching this rave review, and I hope this video was entertaining and enjoyable. And if it was, please click that thumbs up button. And also, if you watch this video, you may be interested in my next videos on the Galion TS A75 or something else that might fit better to your budget. So make sure to check out my playlist as well as the next recommendation list, and I'll see you guys on my next one. Until next time.